They say some places don't just hold memories, they breathe them. For me, that place was the jungle behind my grandmother's house. Every summer, I would visit her quiet village nestled on the edge of a forest that most villagers feared. They said spirits wandered its paths, that the trees whispered secrets, and that girls like me had no business wandering alone. But for me, the jungle wasn't danger. It was freedom. My name is Ariba. I was 23, caught between traditions I didn't choose and a future already planned for me. At home, I was someone's daughter, someone's fiancée, spoken for, restrained. But out there among the tall grass and rustling leaves, I could breathe. I first saw him on a humid Thursday evening. The sun had dipped low, casting gold across the tree trunks. I had walked deeper than usual when I heard footsteps behind me. I froze. The forest was never truly silent, but this was different, deliberate. He stepped out from behind a tree. A man, no older than 30, wearing worn-out boots and a faded blue shirt. He didn't look threatening. If anything, he looked lost, like he'd stepped out of time. We stared at each other for what felt like hours, neither speaking. "You're not afraid?" he asked finally, voice low and even. I shook my head. Should I be? He smiled faintly. Not of me, but of what the jungle stirs. His name was Rehan. He lived alone in a wooden cabin deeper in the forest. The villagers called him mad, a recluse. But there was nothing unhinged about him. He spoke with clarity, moved with calm, and observed everything. In the days that followed, I kept returning. Sometimes we spoke. Other times, we sat in silence, watching the sunlight dance on the leaves. He never asked why I came. I never explained. One afternoon, as I was about to leave, he said something that stuck to my thoughts like dew on leaves. "Whenever you leave the house and come into the jungle," he said, not quite looking at me, "I get aroused." I blinked, startled. Before I could speak, he added, "Not in the way you think. It's not lust, it's life. When you arrive, the forest feels different. Alive. You change the air." I didn't know what to say, but I remember blushing. That night, I lay awake, thinking about his words. About how someone I barely knew could see through me more clearly than anyone ever had. I told myself I wouldn't go back. That it was foolish, dangerous even. But the next day, I found myself walking the same path, heart pounding louder than my footsteps. And that's how it began, with a single step into the unknown, and a man who said my presence made the jungle come alive. There's a certain kind of silence that only the jungle knows, a silence that doesn't feel empty, but full. Every leaf, every fluttering bird, every gust of wind seemed to echo something unspoken between us. And in that silence, Rehan and I began to fall into a rhythm we never acknowledged out loud. I returned often, some days under the excuse of fetching herbs for my grandmother, other times without an excuse at all. I knew what I was doing. I just didn't know where it would lead. Rehan never asked questions. He never pried into my life, though I often wished he would. He spoke about books he'd read, about how the forest changed moods with the seasons. Once, he told me he used to live in the city, but the noise had made it hard to breathe. "Out here," he said, "things don't lie. People do." That stayed with me. I wanted to be honest with him, but I wasn't. At home, I was still engaged to Sajid, my cousin, and a match arranged when we were children. He was ambitious, proud, and polite when he had to be. Our wedding was 6 months away, and everyone treated it like a certainty, something inevitable. But every time I sat across from Sajid, all I could feel was the weight of a life I didn't choose. One afternoon in the jungle, as Rehan and I sat beneath a thick banyan tree, I finally said it. "I don't want to get married," I whispered. He turned his head slightly, but said nothing. I'm not sure I ever did. He picked up a fallen leaf and traced its veins with his finger. "Then why did you say yes?" "I didn't," I replied. My silence did. That was the first time he looked at me, not just glanced, but really looked, like he was trying to see if I meant it. "I don't want to hurt anyone," I said quickly, "but I don't want to live a life built on duty either." Still, he didn't touch me. He never did. Instead, he stood and handed me the leaf. You can't lie to people forever, especially not to yourself. I stared at that leaf the whole walk home. That night, I found a folded paper tucked beneath my shawl. He must have slipped it there when I wasn't looking. Inside was a single line in his careful handwriting. If you are ever truly free, I'll be waiting beneath the banyan. For the first time in years, I felt like someone wasn't trying to take from me, but giving me a choice. The next morning, I looked Sajid in the eye and told him the truth. Or at least I told him enough of it. But truth has a way of rippling, even when you whisper it. And in our village, even whispers travel faster than footsteps. I thought speaking my truth would set things right. Instead, it cracked open a silence that had kept my world together. After I told Sajid that I couldn't go through with the wedding, he didn't say a word, just stared, jaw clenched, fists resting on his knees. He didn't ask if there was someone else. He didn't need to. Suspicion was already etched across his face. The next morning, word spread like wildfire through the village. My aunt refused to look me in the eye. Neighbors suddenly became strangers. Even my grandmother, who had always shielded me, asked with trembling lips, "What have you done?" I hadn't told anyone about Rehan, not out of shame, but out of protection. He wasn't some secret lover or scandal. He was my escape, my clarity. But the village didn't care about clarity. It cared about control. 2 days later, Sajid followed me. I didn't know it at the time. I had wandered, as always, into the jungle with a soft heart and heavy thoughts. I waited under the banyan tree, where Rehan once said he'd be. And when he appeared, something in me eased. Without a word, we sat beside each other. But when I returned, Sajid was waiting at the gate, eyes blazing. "You think I wouldn't find out?" he spat. "That jungle dweller? That madman?" My stomach twisted. "You followed me?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stormed into the courtyard and began shouting. About disgrace. About betrayal. About how no decent girl sneaks into the jungle to meet a man like that. My grandmother cried. My uncle slapped the wall so hard it echoed. I stood frozen. No tears, no protest. I had broken something sacred. Silence. The next day, I ran to the forest. I needed to warn Rehan, to explain, to ask for, I don't even know what. But when I reached the cabin, it was empty. No firewood. No kettle. No trace of him. Gone. Only a folded scrap of paper remained on the doorstep. "You were never truly mine." And I could not bear a second betrayal. My breath caught in my throat. I sank to the ground, holding the note like it could answer all the questions now roaring through me. Later, I would learn from a local shopkeeper that Rehan had once been engaged 2 years ago. She'd left him for someone richer, someone safer. He'd disappeared then too, only to return and live alone on the forest's edge. And now I'd done the same, lied through omission. Hidden my truth long enough for it to turn into poison. That night, locked in my room, I stared at the moonlight filtering through the window and whispered the only words I had left. "I didn't mean to lose you." But the jungle, once so alive, offered no reply. Time in the village moved slowly after Rehan left, but my guilt moved faster. Every day felt like a loop. Quiet judgment, restless nights, and the ache of words left unsaid. I tried to write him letters, though I had no address. I even returned to the jungle once or twice, hoping, foolishly, that he'd be there. He never was. But the jungle still pulled at me, like a forgotten melody you can't unhear. 3 months passed before I found the courage to return for real. This time I wasn't sneaking away, I was leaving. My grandmother had fallen ill, the house had grown cold, and my engagement had been officially broken. I told no one where I was going. I just walked. The forest greeted me like an old friend, wounded but waiting. The air smelled the same. The path hadn't changed, but I had. When I reached the clearing where his cabin used to be, I stopped. The structure was gone, but in its place was something new, a small garden. Lavender, jasmine, wild tulips, planted carefully in a circle. At its center, a stone, smoothed by time, carved with a single word, begin. I knelt beside it, unsure whether to smile or cry. Then I heard a branch shifting. I turned. Rehan stood by the trees, arms crossed, not angry but cautious, like a man who'd seen this before and wasn't sure if it was real. "You came back," he said, voice quieter than I remembered. I stood slowly. "I never wanted to leave." He looked at the garden. "I wasn't sure you'd ever see it." "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I should have told you the truth from the beginning. I was scared. Not of you, of losing control of my life." "I understand," he said. "That's why I left. I won't chase a shadow again." I stepped closer. "I'm not a shadow. Not anymore." Silence hung between us. Then he reached into his pocket and handed me something small, a folded leaf. Inside, written in the same steady handwriting as before, "If you've come to choose, then let it be your own." No promises. No declarations. Just a choice. I didn't beg him to come with me. He didn't ask me to stay. We both knew love isn't about possession, it's about presence. We sat beside each other until the sun dipped low and the forest turned gold again. When I stood to leave, I turned back once. He was still there, seated quietly, a man who lived in silence, but heard everything. I walked away, not with sorrow, but with something softer. Some loves don't need an ending, just a beginning. And now, whenever I pass a grove of trees or feel the hush of leaves above, I remember the words he once told me. "Whenever you come into the jungle, I feel alive."